The first thing is that I hate titles. I really do. And then when such a title carries with it a weight of imposition, spiritual imposition, sense of additional duties, an enlargement of one's constituency, yes, it becomes very much a burden. And the only way I cope with it is just to ignore that title completely and carry on with whatever I feel comfortable doing without looking back necessarily.
What are you offering Nigerians by launching this political party, and are you going to be personally involved in the campaigns and even launching the candidature?
There are many voiceless people in Nigeria, and sometimes even when they have a voice, when they have a platform for the expression of their voice, they find they cannot really relate to any of the existing political parties. This is especially so of a very idealistic youth who feel that there's no point trying to buck the system, that even if they enter the political party, they will not be allowed to fully express what ideas they have and contribute to the development of the nation. And the people with whom we formed this party, we've emphasized from the very beginning that politics should not be about the position at the top. There's such a lot of work to be done on the grassroots level, local governments, being members of the House of Assembly. And in fact, some of our members, since we formed this party, some of our members found a place, decided to join certain political parties, but their hearts are not in those parties.
All right, so if the party doesn't have any specific ideological leanings, what exactly are you offering Nigerians at this particular juncture in the country's history?
Well, when you say it does not have an ideological leaning, I will invite you to visit the website. And you'll see a manifesto there, very elaborate, perhaps the most detailed, well thought up manifesto of all the present political parties. So definitely it has an ideological leaning.
Now, despite the historical and the social problems in Nigeria, many experts believe that the country shows great promise, and that if growth can be sustained above 7.6%, and if the energy issues can be resolved, as President Jonathan has pledged to do, then Nigeria can rise to become a G20 economy within the next 10 years. Your views?
That's part of the frustration of many youths, and even some grown-up, elderly, seasoned politicians who cannot come to terms with the fact that at this stage we cannot produce the required energy for even a level of sustained cottage industry. Doctors are interrupted in the midst of operations because of power failure. Schools go into recess, machines decay, rot away because they are not in constant refurbishment stage. And there is no new thought of decentralization, no concerted programs towards the decentralization of the production and distribution of energy. Now, this is what we discussed among ourselves, and we feel that a new party like this, at least those who succeed in getting to positions of power, can actually influence and bring to some kind of fruition. There's no question at all, and the word I hate is about to come out, but it's unavoidable. Potential. Potential, potential, potential. Nigeria has been potential. It's been potential all my life. And it's got to a stage where many people feel that, look, let's try and translate this potential into something concrete.
Now, Nigerians in general are very sensitive about the country constantly being branded as corrupt, but it's essentially this perception and issues about electoral imperfections that led to President Obama not visiting Nigeria on his first visit to Africa. You responded to the sensitivity of Nigerians by saying Nigeria is a nation that repeatedly blows its chance to stand tall, to present to the world a massively endowed colossus of a nation of human genius. What, in your opinion, is the reason that Nigeria is not working at optimum level with such human genius?
First of all, again, this country is frustratingly endowed with human talent. The material talent is obvious, the resource, oil, minerals, lush vegetation, we used to produce our own food and so on and so forth. The human talent is scattered all over the world. Saudi Arabia, the United States, Soviet Union, even Lapland. There's a Nigerian there who's actually living in Lapland, you know, fishing and so on. I mean, where won't you find Nigerians? Nigerians have contributed to some of the rocket successes, you know, component parts of NASA in the United States of America. Again and again, there have been projects to try and entice such brains back into the country. And each time, after a year, 2 years, just the frustration of a lack of job fulfillment. I know a doctor, for instance, who sold his surgery, highly classed cosmetic surgeon, which means, of course, a marvelous surgeon, you know, real diseases. And he came home. After about a year, he left his entire clinic, all the instruments. He said, I donated, but I'm going back to where I can find job fulfillment. So this history of a waste, you know, is so long, so prolonged, that it comes to a point where at least some kind of pressure must be put, you know, on the existing political arrangements to at least attract the possibility of development.
And what is needed? Because in essence, with this human capital, with the resource endowment, it seems as though the missing link is leadership. What is it that leaders in Nigeria, an emergent breed of leaders, need to be sensitive to, that they need to be strategic about?
Here we have the standard, familiar spiral of a vicious cycle. You steal, you absolutely rob the nation blind. Then when the money which you've stolen, the resources which you've cornered, the industries, unproductive industries which you've cornered, you use those resources to recycle yourself. And when, let us say, even the terms of office do not permit you to go on, you make sure that you put your clones in the same position. This has been the bane of the Nigerian polity. The military came and made matters worse. You know, they came in, you know how they came in, saviors, corruption would be slaughtered, you know, St. George and the Dragon, they make a noise here and there. And what do? Look at all of them. Multimillionaires. Ask yourself how a general, even a general, can build the kind of mansion which he has. How does a general start an air service with a salary and pension? They sit squat, position themselves in many areas. There's a military man who never won an election, who's the president of Senate in Nigeria today. I've said this at home and I say it anywhere. It's all a lie about winning an election. They manipulated the elections to place their own people in positions of power and resource. Now, having said that, I don't want to be misunderstood. There are marvelous minds within the military. I know them, I interact with them. In fact, some of them have already indicated that they want to come into this party. So I'm not tarring everybody with the same brush. But the reality is that they have violated the possibilities of democratic development.
Now, beyond Nigeria, you've also been an outspoken critic of poor and failed states in Africa. You've spoken against the situation in Zimbabwe, and what we've seen now is a power-sharing government of national unity, but with the ruling elite not willing to relinquish power. Similar things have happened in Kenya. What do you make of where Africa stands today?
Again, we talked about leadership, so that means we moved from personalities really to a phenomenon of control, of guidance, of imagination, creative imagination, of knowledgeability of the task involved in being a leader. That is the central problem. And in some cases, of course, we're still suffering from the aftermath of, which we shouldn't be, of the colonial presence. Because when the colonial powers were leaving, in many instances, all over the African continent, they ensured that they placed their surrogate in position with whom they could, quote unquote, do business. Nigeria is an obvious example in which one section was manipulated into power, and it was the least politically sophisticated section in the country. And I think that disease, and we're talking not just of English colonialism, settler colonialism, French colonialism, Portuguese colonialism, the totality of that legacy also, in a minuscule way, is involved in the present dilemma of leadership on the African continent.
Now, you've applied your mind to a lot of Africa's problems in your writings. Your new book, You Must Set Forth at Dawn. How does it deal with some of these complexities about being an African in the 21st century? I know that you draw on your own experiences, your exile, your imprisonment, the rest of it, and what solutions do you proffer?
Well, Africa, first of all, doesn't have a single identity, just as it doesn't have a single history. And sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that the solution to Africa's problems should be uniform. I disagree with that. The post-apartheid situation in South Africa is a very different one from the post-colonial situation in Nigeria. The post-military situation and the problems involved of Ghana, of Nigeria, very different from the succession of one democratic government to another, especially if the culture of corruption is simply a question of handing over, after promises, after, fitful, commencing gesture of seriousness. It's very different. So, and I wonder sometimes whether the AU recognizes this. I know that the AU is very much beleaguered. You have the situation of religious conflict, tearing, which has torn apart a country like Somalia, in spite of their history. You have racism, internal racism. People are embarrassed to talk about racism going on in the Sudan, which actually underpins even the economic issue. See, it's very radical, very seeming very, very knowledgeable to talk about the economic problems. Yes, the economic problems are there. Problems of resources, contests for resources are there, but there are also intangible issues like racism, like religious bigotry, like religious imperialism, which have to be addressed in a very frank, concerted way by an organization like the AU. Are they addressing such issues? When they talk about peer review, for instance, which they do behind doors, and they say, oh yes, we have reviewed on a peer level, do they really, how frankly do they talk to one another? How ready are they to go to the aid, to the rescue of the progressive forces within those countries which are being oppressed, downtrodden, undergoing the ravages, the contempt, the contumely of internal colonialism? In other words, are they content to say, sometimes as they do, as long as there is a black person at the head of affairs, it doesn't matter what he does to his own people? Such situation is unacceptable to many of us. And so that's why we keep screaming until we get hoarse and begin to sound like a worn disc, over and over again. But we must continue to say it because we believe that we deserve better.
Now, as part of your visit to South Africa, you've been part of the literary festival that's been going on in Cape Town. And one of the things that you jokingly lamented was that male writers are an endangered species. But as young women, as young voices come to the fore, do you think that they should be raising noise about specific issues? What should they be saying? What should they be using the power of the pen for?
Well, one thing I've never tried to do is to dictate themes to writers, so to say a writer has a responsibility to go this way or the other. I prefer just simply to say that there are so many themes involving the female condition on the African continent, the backwardness of some societies, of some nations, vis-a-vis relationship, gender relationship, sometimes sections within a community. I would like, subjectively, for instance, to see young female writers addressing issues of gender inequality. They don't have to. It's also the responsibility of men. Say that. Addressing issues of enforced child marriage. We have a notorious case in Nigeria right now. I don't consider myself a feminist. I just consider myself an egalitarian, and therefore I'm blind to differences in gender. Well, not all the way. Certainly I value differences, very, very important. But you have a situation where somebody is saying that my tradition permits me to marry an underage girl, to violate a body which is not yet ready, to copulate with a man, and then flaunts either religion or tradition, you know, in that cause. I like to take one of the books of these young women writers and slap them in the face with it, you know, and maybe sometime female writers, you even go beyond merely writing these books and use them as a real physical weapon, you know, violent weapon against their oppressors. I just cannot stand, you know, how can we say we're liberated from colonial experience or apartheid experience and then discriminate among our own kinds, create a substratum of humanity within this society? These are things which I find very, very difficult to accept. So without dictating to young female writers, I'd like to suggest to them that the possibilities of exploring these ones, they are in a better position than I to do it.